On this day 30 years ago, June 27th, 1990, the popular racing movie Days of Thunder came out. So today I thought that it'd be fun to look back at this hallmark of a racing movie. As said before, Days of Thunder was released on June 27th, 1990. The movie was created with a budget of $55 million, which would be about $108 million if adjusted to 2020 inflation. A recent equivalent to this would be The Martian from 2015, so to say that this was a big pop culture milestone for NASCAR would be an understatement. And the movie would do well, using that budget to go and get $158 million at the box office. Adjusted to 2020 inflation, that would get $310 million. This would be about the same equivalent to modern-day hits like Deadpool 2, Zootopia, and the remake of Aladdin. It was a huge movie in the grand scheme of things and actually matched Talladega Nights without inflation added in, even though it preceded the 2006 film by 16 years. On top of this, the film was a smash hit upon video release, obtaining $40 million more in rentals. The reception, though, was still very mixed. While the general public overall liked the movie as shown by the revenue and continued cult status over the decades amongst racing fans, it wasn't as warmly received by critics. As of recording this, the film has a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes. Many couldn't get past the poor dialogue and characters that were as flat as a decades-old root beer. And to their credit, they were mostly right. The dialogue especially did have some pretty awful spats. But even so, it was still quite popular. Film and directing legend Quentin Tarantino actually said that Days of Thunder is his all-time favorite racing movie. High praise from one of the best directors in the history of film. The film was nominated for Best Sound in the 1991 Academy Awards alongside Dick Tracy, Total Recall, and The Hunt for Red October. But all of those and Days of Thunder would lose out to Dances with Wolves, which, to be fair, is a totally deserving film, as it's one of the greatest movies of all time. The movie was actually all filmed and produced from December 11th, 1989 to May 7th, 1990. Filming mainly took place in two spots, Daytona Beach as well as Charlotte, North Carolina. These were and still are the two main hubs for NASCAR. But the reason filming had to be extended all the way to May was due to disagreements between director Tony Scott and producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. This led to having to refilm at these locations and spend thousands of extra dollars to recreate the atmosphere of the original shoot. What was the original shoot? The 1990 Daytona 500. NASCAR allowed made-for-film cars to drive on the track during that year's running of the event. The cars weren't scored, but were accurate to the period, as they were provided by newer NASCAR team owner Rick Hendrick. These cars would be driven by Greg Sacks, Tommy Ellis, Bobby Hamilton, and Hut Strickland. In return for the used cars, Hendrick's real-life car dealership, City Chevrolet, was used as an in-film sponsor. As mentioned before, the film was directed by Tony Scott, the same man who directed the 1986 classic Top Gun. Don Simpson was one of the producers. Simpson had a long career that began in the 1970s, and it began with a bang, helping the distribution marketing for a decade-defining film, that being A Clockwork Orange. Before Days of Thunder, he would also help produce Top Gun, as well as Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2. His partner in these was Jerry Bruckheimer, who since Days of Thunder has become one of the most recognizable names in cinema, with roles in producing movies like Black Hawk Down, Bad Boys, and the Pirates of the Caribbean films. So, talent behind the camera was absolutely top-notch. That was only topped by those in front of the camera. The film starred Tom Cruise, who was as much of a top-notch actor back then as he is today. Cruise would portray Cole Trickle, who was supposed to be a young driver who was trying to make his way into the sport. His character would be heavily influenced by the recently passed Tim Richmond, and his name was an obvious homage to the late Dick Trickle. Cole's crew chief would be played by Robert Duvall, and was named Harry Hogg, who was named after Harry Hyde, the man who crew chief Tim Richmond. Trickle's love interest in the film was Dr. Claire Lewicki, who was played by Nicole Kidman. The two showed obvious on-screen chemistry as they actually got married in 1990, and it would last about 11 years. Trickle's first main rival would be Rowdy Burns, played by Michael Rooker. Rooker's character was meant to be and emulate his all-time favorite driver, Dale Earnhardt. While many know him from this movie, he's most well known today from two roles he played: Merle Dixon in The Walking Dead, and Yondu in the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
To this day, Rooker actually still wears a red City Chevrolet hat to conventions and is a huge NASCAR fan. Take it from me. When I got to finally meet him at the convention that I went to, we actually went back and forth about Dale Sr. and Dale Jr. Trust me, he is a huge, huge NASCAR fan still. Awesome guy all around, too. And Cary Elwes would play Cole's main rival, Russ Wheeler, who was made to be like Rusty Wallace. Elwes was hot off of two starring roles. In 1987, he starred in The Princess Bride, and in 1989, he starred in Glory. And Days of Thunder was another big-budget movie that he was tabbed for. The movie overall holds up quite well. While there are some glaring inaccuracies at different points, the decision to film with real cars truly makes the film one that is much more crisp-looking still today. With this, nothing can really be said that looks fake. It's all real. The cars side-by-side racing are real. The cockpits are real, and crashes are definitely real. As for the score though, well, it kind of is a product of its time. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, it seemed like every movie had a very similar soundtrack, and Days of Thunder was no different. Synthesizers everywhere. Even with it being created by Hans Zimmer, the same man who composed music for films like The Lion King, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, the Dark Knight trilogy, and just about every Christopher Nolan flick. Zimmer actually hates this one, and is basically embarrassed about his work on this film. Overall, though, I have to say that I absolutely love Days of Thunder. It's not an all-around perfect movie, but in my opinion, it's actually a perfect NASCAR movie. While NASCAR movies before this one had either not been funded very well or had been geared more towards kids, this one was incredibly well funded and was also geared towards the general audience. And while movies like Talladega Nights make fun of the sport and its fans, this movie seems to generally have somewhat of a pretty good respect towards both entities. While this movie is incredibly cheesy, it's still really, really fun. Much like NASCAR itself, the best parts of this movie is when it just flat out is having fun. It captures the essence of the sport, and this is coming from someone who didn't grow up watching this movie. The first time I saw it was when I was a freshman in college. It's an absolute blast either way, and you really should watch it, especially with it being the 30-year anniversary. But now, I want to hear from you. Have you seen Days of Thunder? I really hope you have. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Days of Thunder if you've seen it though. And while you're at it, leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. And until next time, have a good one.